Hi everyone, it's Liz Barnett here, fitness and food coach based in New York City. It's Meal Prep Monday, and I'm going to show you how to make one of my favorite meals. If you're commenting, I can't see right now because someone else is handling the camera for me, so I can use my hands. So we'll save your comments for the end. Thanks for joining me on Periscope. So as a fitness and food coach, I help my clients figure out the best way to incorporate healthy eating in a sustainable way in their lives that helps helps them accomplish their goals, whether they're fitness goals or whatever they are. So, a lot of people think healthy eating has to be challenging, it's a lot of work, and it doesn't taste good. So hopefully this dish will get you to think otherwise. I'm going to show you the easiest way possible to make this, and from start to finish, you'll see how much hands-on time there is, plus a little extra that I did before that I'll explain that's also very short. So we're going to make spaghetti squash, which you may have seen or heard about. It's really popular on the blogosphere because it's a great substitute for pasta. It's very low carb. Tastes like whatever delicious sauce you put on it. So we're going to make spaghetti squash with some meatballs, marinara, and some broccoli. Now here's the thing. I'm using pretty much everything other than the spaghetti squash as already pre-made. Now that might be a little bit of a shortcut, and I often like to make things homemade myself, but if you don't have the time to do that, I'm a big advocate of cutting corners where you can. Now, keep in mind it might cost a little bit of extra money, but that's what I also want to prove to you, that it doesn't have to. This meal is going to clock in at between $4 and $5 a person, so we're going to make a big batch, and it'll leave you about 4 to 5 servings, depending on how big your servings are. So again, it's going to be really super cost effective and time efficient as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my pan started here. I already started to preheat it, and we're just going to talk about the meatballs here. So I'm going to have you zoom in. So these are pre-made chicken meatballs. They're from a company called Blinsky's. I know they have them at Whole Foods and at some Fairways. They're spinach and garlic. And I want you to take a look at the back nutrition panel here. So you can see the ingredient list. It's very short and sweet, just the way I like it. So skinless chicken, spinach, water, fresh garlic, sea salt, fennel seed, and black pepper. Now you could definitely make that on your own. I love making meatballs on my own, chicken, turkey, beef, all that good stuff, because you can kind of throw in all the seasonings and different flavors you like. And you really don't need breadcrumbs to bind it. So I tend to avoid gluten and grains as much as possible. If you don't, you could certainly include them or use a different alternative, but you can see you don't even really need it. So this is a great source of protein, and because of the spinach, you have good amounts of vitamin A and iron and all kinds of good stuff, and some fiber even, which you're not even usually going to have in a meatball. So these are pre-cooked. You don't even need to heat them up. I'm going to imagine like we're going to eat this right away, but what I might do normally is just mix the meatballs with the sauce and package it that way for my meal prep, but we're just going to go through because I'm going to be eating dinner after this. So these are pre-cooked meatballs, and like I said, you could certainly make your own. I'm just going to add a little oil to the pan just to warm it up with the sauce. And so, you could use ground meat as well. You don't have to use meatballs, but I just think it's a little bit more fun to eat that way. Now, in addition to the meatballs, we're going to use a marinara sauce. Again, it's one of those things that you could make on your own. Google a recipe, use your mom's. I don't really care. But I'm going to show you my favorite brand. It's Rao's or Rao's. I'm not quite sure. I think it's Rao's. And again, really short, clean ingredient list, which is back here. So we have Italian tomatoes, pure olive oil, fresh onions, salt, garlic, fresh basil, black pepper, and oregano. Now, generally, with my tomato sauce, if I'm going to buy it pre-made, I want to make sure it's in a glass jar. If it's in a tin can or an aluminum can, rather, you want to make sure it's organic, because those cans are lined with something called BPA, which has been linked to different health issues. So glass jars are always the safest way to go. I generally try to buy organic because tomatoes are one of those vegetables that you want to try to have organic as much as possible, but this is really delicious. So we're going to stick with this. And I did find it on sale. So I'm going to just pop that open and then just pour that in there. Now, again, you could use any sauce you want. You could do this with like a pesto or something like that. Really, the possibilities are endless. Where's my spoon? So we're just going to heat that up a little bit. So again, just a couple minutes, and this is really taking me longer than it should because I'm chatting with you guys. Now, for your spaghetti squash, I don't know if you can see it there in your background. One of these guys. Okay, I'm going to show you how to cut it and prep it to be roasted, and I'm going to show you how to deal with it after the fact. So we're going to come on over here to my cutting board, and you might have seen spaghetti squash prepared cut like this, but actually, and I learned this from another blogger, that you want to cut it down widthwise. So what I like to do is kind of like crack a little hole in there. You want to be careful because it's you know, it's a round vegetable, so it's gonna roll. But you see, it's pretty easy to open there. And there we have our insides. Now, I leave the seeds until after I roast them because they just come out really easily. You could actually kind of roast those like pumpkin seeds as well. The reason you cut them this way is it's gonna cook a little bit more evenly. And some of the water will drain out. I'll show you how I set them up. And also the best part is when we remove the actual squash, the strands are more like spaghetti noodles. So they're not short, which when you cut it long ways, they tend to be short. So the other thing you want to do before you roast the squash is prick some air holes in them. You can use a knife or a fork. So that's just going to help steam escape so that, again, it cooks evenly and you don't end up with a mushy mess. So you're going to make sure you do that on both sides. Now, my meatballs are heating up. I'm just going to give them a little stir. And I did do one of those cooking show tricks where I pre-made part of the meal, but you saw how quick it was to prep. So after you prep it, all you're gonna do, I like to use a glass baking dish, but you can certainly use a metal one. This is the done spaghetti squash. Depends on your oven, it depends how large the squash is. Somewhere, I mean, you could do it at 350 degrees longer or a 400, 425 for a little less time. You're gonna have to figure that out with your oven. I can't really tell you. Somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes. So just check on it. If you can see, it started to get a little toasty here. When they have a bigger stem, sometimes they even start to get burned, so you could put some oil on that to make sure that doesn't happen. So here are our roasted squash. I'm gonna grab a fork. You're gonna stay right there. So I like to use a fork. You could use a spoon, and normally I would just do this over the garbage, but see, I'm just going to take my fork and run it in the inside until I get out all those seeds. Now, the part of me that hates wasting food, I see all that squash and I'm like, I want to save the squash and remove the seeds, but it's really not worth it. So you can just toss that away. And then all you need to do is take that fork and just run it through the inside. Look how fast and easy that is, right? So here you have your spaghetti squash. Sometimes there's still a few errant seeds in there, so you want to make sure you get all those seeds. So you literally just use a fork or a spoon and you just scrape them all out. I've seen some creative people on the internets, on Instagram, who like then use the shell to serve the final dish. You could do that if you save it intact. So again, look at all that spaghetti squash, and if that was actual spaghetti, that'd be like 700 calories worth of spaghetti. I'm not just worried about calories, you know, it's just a part of what makes up a food, but it's gonna be very high in carbohydrate, spikes your insulin levels, gonna make you tired and sleepy and more hungry and eventually fat. So there's our spaghetti squash, there's our meatballs and our sauce. I'm gonna turn that off. So if I were gonna serve this now, which I'll save some on the side, I would just take the squash, top it with some meatballs. I like to add a little Parmesan cheese. If you're vegetarian, you can make vegetarian meatballs or use a different alternative. There's lots of options. But I'm preparing most of this. I'm gonna have one serving for myself and the rest I'm gonna freeze for later. So I found these wonderful little individual metal casserole tins that have plastic stuck on them, but there's 3 of them here. So what I'm gonna do, oh, here we go, is I'm gonna use each of these tins to kind of portion out a meal. I let the food cool, and then I wrap it in saran wrap and then aluminum foil. The saran wrap helps the food stop from sticking. But then when you're ready, you just take it out of the freezer. You're gonna let it defrost in the fridge overnight. Remove the aluminum foil, remove the saran wrap. You can put the aluminum foil back on because that's gonna help it cook a little bit faster. And so here's what I do. I'm gonna take some of my spaghetti squash and I'll just lay it in here. Now this is just completely plain. You could add a little oil or some garlic powder or seasoning, whatever really you want, but I don't mind it plain because the sauce is the best part. Yeah, there's a couple little errant seeds I'm gonna pull out of there. And again, this is my food, so I can touch it with my hands. It's okay. And then I'm gonna take, I like to actually put the sauce and the meatballs sort of to the side. I mean, it's gonna get on the spaghetti squash, but that seems to help it keep from getting mushy when you defrost it. So I'm gonna put a few meatballs in there with some sauce. And then here's my other vegetable components. So right now we got really like 2.5 vegetable servings between the squash, the sauce, and the spinach there. These are frozen broccoli florets. Now, some people might think frozen vegetables like gross. Actually, most frozen vegetables are as nutritious or more nutritious than their freshly grown counterparts. The reason being, when they're grown, they're picked and they're flash frozen right away, so they retain the nutrients. When you go to the grocery store and you buy a head of broccoli, you don't even know where it's come from, how long it's been on a truck, how long it's been sitting on the shelf, so it's going to have fewer nutrients than this broccoli, which is actually fresh frozen. The best thing to do is always try to eat in season, so, you know, think about where you live and buy foods that are grown within a reasonable distance. I mean, I'm in New Jersey. There's no mango growing in New Jersey right now, so if I really want mango, I'll get some at the supermarket, but again, it's not going to be seasonally appropriate. So these are actually still frozen, and in this case, because I'm going to be putting this back into the freezer anyway, I'm not even going to let them defrost, and I'm just going to put them back in here. I keep them plain so that when you bake them, they kind of end up steamed. You could saute broccoli with garlic. Again, I don't mind. I think this food's delicious, so I don't need a ton of stuff on it. What you can do is when you're ready to heat it up, add some cheese or whatever else you want. So here we have one of our perfectly portioned little meals. Look how beautiful and gorgeous that is. Again, I'm going to take some saran wrap after it cools, wrap it in saran wrap, then wrap it in aluminum foil and pop them in the freezer, and they stack right on top of each other, which is amazing. So then it's there for, you know, whenever you want to eat it. You always want to label your frozen meals, what it is and when you froze it, because, you know, again, they start to get funky after a while, but look how fast that took me. So like 6 minutes or something like that to prep everything. And then this, you know, 30 to 45 minutes, but all you had to do was cut it and stick it in the oven. So no excuses. There is absolutely no reason you cannot be cooking for yourself. You have one body, you got to treat it right. So I hope you guys enjoyed and learned a few tips tonight on Meal Prep Monday. Again, I'm Liz Barnett. You can check me out on Instagram and Twitter at Liz Barnett, B-A-R-N-E-T. Or you can check out my website, www.lizbarnett.com. Have a great night, guys, and I'll see you next time.